Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we look at what's really going on in the world of the BRICS. Now, my name is Rod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about not so great Britain and its attitude towards Russia, which over the last 35 years where I've lived in Russia has never done the British any harm, and in fact has made many friendly gestures towards them. Now, as many of you are aware, I am actually British and do occasionally visit the place. One thing I do regularly is see what's going on there in the media in regards to Russia, and now how the level of Russophobia in the UK is off the scale, particularly among the media and political class. I mean, for example, last weekend, despite it being the Easter holidays, the British elite were maintaining their level of rhetoric about the Ukraine and Russia. I mean, London issued several statements, and the British press has repeatedly issued its anti-Russian provocations. I mean, the British Prime Minister, Sir Juan Keir Starmer, has even issued tweets in support of the Ukraine while on his holidays. Now, it goes without saying that British diplomats and military personnel are working tirelessly on their challenging project of sending what is left of their small and ill-equipped armed forces to the Ukraine. That's going to be a fun venture, isn't it? Now, it's like watching a demented chihuahua barking at a bear. Now, do remember, this is occurring against the backdrop of a growing number of domestic socio-economic crises, which are indicative of the dismal current state of this once great but seriously declining power that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland is. I mean, news outlets around the world, including here in Russia, have been reporting on the ongoing industrial action in Birmingham, the second largest city in Britain, where workers in the refuse collection sector have been on strike for the second month consecutively. Current figures indicate that up to 25,000 tonnes of rubbish are decomposing on the streets, and the city has experienced a significant problem with rodents and other problems of pests. Seemingly rats as big as cats are being seen on the street among the piles of rubbish, and the government's already initiated consultations with the army regarding the resolution of the strike, but this has been unable to take any action as the army is acknowledging its own limitations, plus the government in the face of its trade unions. I mean, it seems that the army doesn't have actually the resources to deal with the problem. Now, before I continue, I'd like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and my website, SCOBRICSinsight.com, to further develop it. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and I'm thanking you all now. Do like, share and subscribe, and do keep the comments coming. Love to read them, love to respond to them. Now, it's important to actually look at the fact that the government of the UK is the Labour Party, which originated out of the trade union movement and historically relied on the trade unions as its primary source of funding for the party in general and its election campaigns. I mean, even the so-called Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, who actually left school at 16 with more children than educational qualifications, one child, no qualification, was actually a full-time union organiser before she became a member of Parliament. Prior to that, I think she was a home help. Plus, the majority of the Labour MPs have funding links to the trade unions, so it's unlikely they're going to challenge the trade union, as the trade unions are the hand that feeds them. Now, it's understood that other trade unions are threatening to expand their industrial action alongside the Birmingham strikers on a national scale, and not just for those involved in the refuse sector, but other sectors of the public sector particularly. I mean, the other day, the second largest teachers' union announced its intention to stop work in September. Notice it's after the holidays, isn't it? Which could lead to a strike of hundreds of thousands of teachers across the country and have disruption on the pupils for the next school year. In fact, the whole of the British public sector appears ready to strike, causing mayhem across the country. I mean, concurrently, Britain has experienced another scandal which involves the closure of the British steel plant in the town of Scunthorpe. Yeah, Typho put the T in Britain. Who put that cunt in Scunthorpe? Now in March, its Chinese owners announced that the enterprise had completely unprofitable and was losing up to £700,000 a day. Well, there's no surprise there. But even as you see, British Steel was not actually British, and that's a pretty common situation in Britain, where almost everything's owned by foreign companies. Most of British airports, which used to be owned by the British Airports Authority, and that includes Heathrow Airport, are now owned by foreign companies, including the Qatar Investment Fund. Most of the utility companies in the UK are owned by foreign funds, and like Macquarie and Dubai and the Qataris. Water companies, even the car companies like Land Rover, Jaguar's owned by the Indians, Rolls-Royce by BMW, and Bentley by Volkswagen. Anyway, on to Scunthorpe. The decision was taken by the Chinese to close the plant, which plays a key role in the city's economy. But there's nothing out of the ordinary there. I mean, many such plants have been closed across Europe in recent years, mainly because they can't afford the energy costs, so they can't produce anything profitably. Now, it's worth noting, though, that Scunthorpe was the last steel plant in Britain that could make virgin steel from iron ore and coke. So it's evident that the former industrial heartland of Europe is undergoing a complete deindustrialisation. In fact, the former Great Britain, which was once the workshop of the world, has hardly any major industries left, and those that do exist are declining rapidly due to the high energy costs. Now, they face these costs because the UK government insists on imposing insane energy policies which have led to the high cost of electricity, which is one of the highest in the world. I mean, the Sir Keir Starmer government took the unexpected step of requesting the return of MPs from their Easter holidays to make an emergency decision regarding the Scunthorpe plant, which they've termed nationalisation, which means they're taking on the losses, and I don't think there's actually going to be any change there. But it was transpired there's no coking coal available in Britain for the plant. Yeah, none at all. Because the last British coal mines in Yorkshire closed 10 years ago in line with the net zero loony green agenda, and the Scunthorpe plant in Lincolnshire is not far from the Yorkshire coalfields. Now, in recent years, coal for Scunthorpe have been imported from Japan and South Africa, now that Japan gets most of its coal from Russia, by the way. The government's currently taking urgent steps to source coke and resolve the issue of the plant's unprofitability, which will not be resolved because it's all down to the cost of energy, and unless they can provide cheap energy, it ain't going to happen. However, it's important to notice that in every case, it's not only the crisis that the British have just got. I mean, despite the less than considerable efforts of the both Conservative and Labour governments, the number of illegal migrants crossing the English Channel on these small rubber boats continues to rise. By mid-April, their number had already exceeded 8,000, and that's only counting the numbers who were actually detected. Now, based on current projections, 2025 is poised to set yet another record of these young third world men of fighting age who just turn up in Britain. And despite the lack of efforts, the government's strategy of undocumented migrants has not met any success. Now, the Daily Telegraph has analysed the statistics over the last few days and concluded that Sir Keir Starmer has lost control over the borders. Now, in this regard, it would be prudent to pose a pertinent question. If Sir Keir Starmer is unable to effectively manage the borders of the Britain, which are sea basically, which have been entrusted him, how can we be expected to oversee the borders of the Ukraine within the framework of the coalition of the willing, or the coalition of the idiots, if you take my opinion? Now, it would be advisable for him to resolve his personal issues at home before attempting to act as a peacemaker in a distant region outside the United Kingdom's borders. However, such questions are generally considered off-limits in the British press, and it's interesting to note within the same newspaper issues, there's often a simple comparison that prompts questions regarding the reliability of their sources. For instance, the latest issue of The Spectator magazine includes a column by the renowned journalist Liddle, who discusses the challenges facing his country. He says there's two British examples that are indicative. The rail link to Birmingham's terrible, and we had a bus service instead of a train the other day, and the country's second city is reminiscent of Kampala, Uganda, with crows instead of marabouts circling over the rubbish heaps that surround the city. So Britain is a country that literally and figuratively is no longer viable. It's a society that's lost its capacity to govern itself and to carry out the basic tasks. I mean, the people of Birmingham were simply asking for the council to empty their bins, which are paying £2,000 a year in council tax. So I would recommend Birmingham initially allocating the funds for the bin men instead of to foreign aid, and then only then if the foreign budget allows. And it's evident this conclusion is not only relevant to Birmingham. It would be logical to address these same messages to the entire British government. I mean, a couple of pages later in the same issue of the Spectator magazine, an editorial calls on Sir Keir Starmer to fill the vacuum in support of the Ukrainian regime if Washington cuts off its aid to them. Now, notwithstanding the fact that the UK already allocates 0.5% of its GDP to the Ukraine, this is the very money that the rubbish collectors in Birmingham and other workers are so lacking. So, however, it's important to note that combining these two topics in this press is strictly prohibited. I mean, the only veteran journalist and no friend of Russia, Peter Hitchens, who's writing in the Mail on Sunday, or the Fascist on Sunday as I like to call it, was prepared to use the term seditious. He connected the issues in his written statement with accurate precision. He said the Ukraine conflict should not be regarded as a patriotic endeavour. Britain has no national interest in maintaining or prolonging this senseless, avoidable, murderous proxy war between the US and Russia taking place in the Ukraine. I mean, he said even the Americans now, who've been attempting to provoke the conflict in the region for a considerable time, are now losing all interest. And it's also important to note that the public funds are being used to maintain the system, and they could evidently be better spent at home. Once again, it's evidence the conclusions drawn are rather obvious, but however, his voice is one that's crying out in the information desert of the United Kingdom. I mean, the local media have now reached a consensus that Britain is in a state of serious disrepair, and they've actually featured some of these sentiments on their front pages. Now, the Sun newspaper, better known as a comic, cites a survey according to which 68% of Britons agreed with the conclusion that Britain is going down the toilet. Furthermore, 32% respondents identified illegal migration as a major issue, with 31% citing the deterioration of health services and 18% regarding the disastrous state of the economy. Now, in the context of professional discourse, the topics of the Ukraine and the war with Russia, which have potential to cause alarm in the general public, are not prioritised. However, Sir Keir Starmer persisted in efforts with a determination that would be more effectively utilised elsewhere to position himself as the foremost anti-Russian advocate. It's obvious that this anti-war activist transformation into this militant quasi-Churchill is more comical the higher the rubbish heaps in Birmingham get that he cannot deal with, or the more boats filled with illegal migrants crossing the channel can. Thanks for watching. Like, share and subscribe, and also hit the alert button so you get informed when I post a new video, and click on the thanks button at the bottom of the screen if you want to help me out. Thanks, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you.